Hi there, thanks for joining me. This is Tiff of Informal Farmer. If you missed me last week, go ahead and go back and check out the video about what homesteading is, what it looks like for me, and what the heck is an informal farmer. For this week, I'm going to be talking about taking those first steps to actually get you to start your homestead. And this doesn't matter how old you are, where you live, or where you're at in your life. There's 3 steps that you can take to at least get started. First, we're going to talk about big goal setting. Then we're going to talk about research, and then breaking that big goal into baby goals on what you could do now to get started. First, we're going to start with your major goal. Don't be afraid to dream big here. Is it being more self-sufficient? That's great. That's a lot of people's goal when it comes to homesteading. Make sure that your goal is specific. This means you want to be more self-sufficient, but what does that mean? Does that mean raising your own cows, raising your own pigs, chickens for eggs, chickens for meat? Be specific on how do you want to be more self-sufficient. Make sure your goal is measurable. And you can do that by breaking that big goal down into smaller goals, such as having a cow, learning how to raise chickens, learning how to can foods, raising pigs, starting a vegetable garden, growing fruit trees. So that way you can measure your progress towards your ultimate goal of self-sufficiency by reaching those little goals as you go along. Make sure your goal has deadlines. So you might want to be completely self-sufficient in 5 years, which would be a pretty ambitious goal, but not impossible. So you start by giving yourself a deadline, looking at what's possible and working towards that. And of course, like I mentioned, you're going to break down your goal into smaller goals. So if you're choosing to start with having a garden first, you're going to break that down into even smaller goals. Where is your garden going to go? What is your soil like? How are you going to fix it? Are you going to do a raised bed or in the ground or have planter boxes? After you've determined what your goals are, made them specific, measurable, given yourself deadlines, broken them down into smaller goals, you will monitor, review, evaluate, and rewrite your goals as you go along. So say you made that goal to be completely self-sufficient in 5 years. Not a bad goal, but maybe after 3 years you realize, oh, maybe we need to change it to 8 years. The point of evaluating and rewriting your goals is to help you be realistic and track your progress. And once you get started, maybe you started a garden in ground and it might not be working for you. So you rewrite your goal to create raised beds. Then how are you going to do that? Are you going to have them wood framed, corrugated steel framed? Here, as you can see, I chose to go with cinder blocks. Now that you've come up with all your goals, have them written out, organized, and kind of create a timeline on what to do, the next thing you're going to do is research what you can do, where you are. So in some residential areas, you may or may not be able to keep chickens. If you live in a rural area, you may be able to have chickens, pigs, goats, and cows. So you just have to see what is available for you. So how do you know what you can do? Where do you find that information? You're going to just do a simple Google search, for example, San Diego city website, and it might take you straight to the city webpage. But what you're going to want to look for on there is your city planning maps. And this will show you what your property is zoned as, whether you're rural, residential, high density residential. And then with that information, you'll be able to dig a little bit deeper to see what is allowed in your zoning areas. If you're not able to find the zoning information on your city or county website, you should be able to find the contact information for the planning departments, and you can either email or call them and they'll be able to tell you whatever you need. Additionally, you might want to look into the animal control websites to see on what types of animals you can have and how many of those animals you can have. Lastly, if you live in a residential area, if you have an HOA, you're definitely going to want to check with your HOA agreement to see if there are any further restrictions on what you're able to do. I have a friend with a more rural housing, but they do have an HOA which says they cannot have any non-domesticated animals. So they can have chickens and pigs, but they would not be able to have a cow. Now that you have your big goal broken down into some smaller goals, and you know what you can do with the property you currently have, it's time to take the next step and breaking those goals down into what you can do now and how are you going to do it. If you're in an area where you can only do gardening, that's a great place to start. So what can you start practicing? Do you have just a little bit of space and need to do some container gardening or tower gardens? Or do you have a little bit more space and you can have some garden beds? And look at the long term. So if your goal is to be completely self-sufficient in 5 years and you're currently living in a plot of land which doesn't allow you to have livestock, you're going to need to add that step into your goal of moving to a property that does allow livestock. And now that you've found that zoning information for your city or county, you can find it for any city or county and determine what type of property you need to be able to fulfill your dreams. If you watched my last video, you'll know that my initial big goal was to be completely self-sufficient. I wanted to grow all my own fruits and vegetables, raise my own animals for meat, and of course have laying hens. Then reality check came in and I knew that I had a good job. I wanted to keep growing and developing professionally. I relied on the benefits that my job has, health insurance. So I couldn't really just give all of that up, but I had to find the happy medium of what can I do now and still work full time? Oh, and raise a 2- and 4-year-old. I had to scale back my big goal. Not that it doesn't exist, but that cannot happen for me right now. So scaling back, I determined that I could have a vegetable garden. I found a piece of agricultural land. So I was able to have pigs and chickens. Eventually I can have a cow. I'm not sure I'm ready for that commitment yet. And I do have fruit trees. My big goal, 100% self-sufficient, has been pushed back. I've created a more realistic timeline or deadline for that. And I'm doing what I can now for the space I'm in, the time I have, and my other obligations. Thanks for joining me for episode 2 in the series of How to Homestead While Working Full-Time. Join me next week where I go over the 5 reasons why now is the time to start homesteading, whether you work full-time, have free time, or going to do it full-time. Go out and start with your goal setting and research and let me know how it goes. You got this.